Thank you. Councilor Baker.
Here.
We're so happy to see that. Councilor Campbell.
Here.
Councilor Siomo. Councilor Edwards. Councilor Asabi George. Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Flynn. Councilor Garrison. Councilor Janey. Councilor McCarthy. Councilor O'Malley. Councilor Wu. And Councilor Zakem. Madam President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, I would like all councilors and guests and staff to please rise as Councilor Asabi George comes up with Sister Pat to lead us in the invocation. After the invocation, I ask everyone to remain standing as Councilor Asabi George leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam President. Today it is my great honor to introduce you to Sister Pat, who on this day, and we'll speak a little bit about this in a little bit, today is National Girls in Sports Day, and Sister Pat is my very first softball coach. So it worked out very nicely to also have her here today to welcome everybody and give us a pre-meeting blessing. Sister Pat.
On this National Girls and Women's Sports Day, we ask you, loving God, to bless all of us assembled here today. We ask a special blessing on the members of the City Council, that your divine wisdom may direct their sense of justice as they make decisions for the people of this great city of Boston. We also ask you to bless all of us who participate in sports. Help us to be grateful for the abilities you have given us. Grant us the strength to play hard and to play well, knowing that whatever skills we have come from you. Help us to strive not for our own glory, but for the good of our teams. Make us realize that if we act out of goodness and respect for others, not only while participating in sports, but in our daily living, we will always be winners. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if we could correct the attendance record or amend it to add Councilor Zakem, who was present. And now we have a special presentation by Councilor Asabi George. You were coming up next.
Come on up. Love that shirt. Come on up. Love it. We have a little bit of room over here too. Thank you. My colleagues, especially those of you that know how much I love sports, know that I love this picture right here. This is pretty exciting. I'm incredibly excited today to present this resolution to these amazing athletes behind me. This year marks the 33rd annual Girls and Women in Sports Day, a national observance celebrating the extraordinary achievements of girls and women in sports. The theme this year is Lead Her Forward. Today we recognize how sports empower, strengthen, and give confidence to girls and women in sports to become leaders and champions for other women. Today I'm reminded of my time playing softball and when I was in high school and when I was coaching at East Boston High. As I remember my students, my players, my teammates, I'm also reminded of how crucial it is to protect Title IX and advance gender equity in sports. when we talk about female athletes, we need to point out, we need to be at a point where girls and women who play sports are just considered athletes. I am always reminded of the important role that my coaches played in my life, whether they were wonderful women like Sister Pat, or whether they were some of the greatest coaches I had that were men who worked to empower me and strengthen me as not just a player, but as a person. I also think about my days coaching at East Boston High. We've got some Eastie girls in the room. My days playing at Boston Tech. O'Brien is in the room. And how fulfilling it was for me as a coach. I also had the opportunity to coach both of my sisters, and my youngest sister went on to pitch at Northeastern, and that was very rewarding for me, not just as a sister, but as her first coach. And for my own 4 boys who play a lot of sports, nothing makes me happier than to see them play with girls. And I know that when they're playing in co-ed programs, that they are learning themselves to be better athletes. So I'm just excited to have everyone here. We have a number of players from Boston Public Schools, and we also have a number of women representing college programs in the city of Boston. And we also have some adult women who continue with their work in athletics in their early years. I do want to introduce one of our East Boston girls who has a few remarks to give and share some of her experiences. Come on up. She also brought me some gear, which you know how much I love East Boston and the blue and gold, so I'm happy to have this. Thank you.
Courage, sacrifice, determination, commitment, toughness, heart, talent, and gut. These are some of the things that stuck with me while being a female athlete. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicolette Brangiaforti, and I am a senior at East Boston High School. Ever since I was a little girl, my dad has always made it clear that female sports are just as important as male sports. Ever since then, I have started my journey as a female athlete at the age of 5. Playing sports at a young age and continuing to do so during my 4 years at East Boston High School has taught me many lessons that have impacted my life both on and off the court and field. Through the guidance of my coaches' values, such as commitment, dedication, loyalty, hard work, and perseverance, they have shaped me to become the woman I am today and view the world. I know that not every situation I encounter will be easy. However, with these traits, I am able to be open to anything that comes my way and view it as a learning experience. From serving at the baseline on the volleyball court, to shooting a free throw at the foul line, to sliding into home plate, I try to be mindful of my actions and choices so I could be a role model and leader to younger female athletes, just like my little sister, Alexandria. I am grateful for all the female athletes in this room and leaders from our community who believe in the importance of female athletics. Thank you for recognizing all of us here today. So I leave you here today with a quote. You'll never know what you are capable of until you take that first step and just do it. Thank you again for this great opportunity.
So in today's consent agenda, there is a resolution recognizing today. All of the girls here and the women will receive a copy of today's resolution that we will be passing in our consent agenda. So thank you, everybody. I'd love to take a group picture. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Well, you know what we'll do is they can grab the one that's the original one here. Oh, all right, sorry. If you even have to come in front of me, I'm much taller than those. Good? Oh, do you want to hold this? Yeah, that's our resolution. I am. Whatever. All right. Oh, yeah, we can have some in the front. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we'll come up front. All right, liking the curly, but looking right down the middle.
Great job, guys. Congratulations, girls.
Thank you.
Oh, I think one more smile, one more smile. There's lots of cameras. will have, each of you will get one. Jess, I think, has given them out.
Matt saw the purple from way over there. It's a big laugh.
Hi. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's like time to switch it up a little. Thank you.
These BC kids, I don't know. My love to everyone. Thanks. So, we don't really need to read this. This is walk as winter. Oh, never mind. Never mind. Never mind. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilor Asabi George. At this time, we're going to move on to approval of the minutes. If there are no corrections to be made, the minutes of the last council meeting will stand approved. Seeing and hearing no objection, the minutes of the last council meeting are so approved. Before I move on, I just wanted to quickly acknowledge, who at some point he was over here, former City Councilor Tito Jackson, who is in the building. So thank you. Good to see you. Moving on to communications from His Honor the Mayor.
Docket number 0305, message in order for confirmation of the appointment of Philomene Laptista as a member of the Boston Public Health Commission for a term expiring January 15th, 2022.
Docket 0305 will be assigned to the Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Community. Moving on to reports of public officers and others.
Docket number 0306, notice is received from the mayor of the appointment of Lorna Rivera as a member of the Boston School Committee for a term expiring January 6, 2020. Docket number
Docket 0306 will be placed on file.
Thank you. Docket number 0307, notice is received from the mayor of the absence from the city from 5:45 a.m. on Saturday, February 2nd, 2019, until 10 a.m. on Monday, February 4th, 2019.
Docket 0307 will be placed on file.
Docket number 0308, communication was received from Council President Andrea Campbell calling for the election of City Clerk for term commencing on February 6, 2019, and ending on February 1st, 2022.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilor Siomo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to make a motion for the election of our city clerk as it is being the first Wednesday in February. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo, and thank you. I think both Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Flynn at the same time said second, so thank you for that. At this time, we will proceed with the election, the nomination being Maureen Feeney, and I'm going to ask our Assistant Clerk to take us through a roll call vote. Thank you. Alex.
Councilor Baker.
Yes.
Councilor Baker, Maureen Feeney. Councilor Campbell,
Yes, Maureen Feeney.
Maureen Feeney. Councilor Siomo,
Maureen Feeney.
Maureen Feeney. Councilor Edwards, Maureen Feeney. Councilor Asabi George. Councilor Flaherty, Maureen Feeney. Councilor Flynn, Maureen Feeney. Councilor Garrison, Maureen Feeney. Councilor Janey, Maureen Feeney. Councilor McCarthy, Maureen Feeney. Councilor O'Malley, Maureen E. Feeney. Councilor Wu, Maureen Feeney. And Councilor Zachem. Having received 12 votes.
Thank you. So Maureen Feeney has been elected as our clerk. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk, and look forward to continuing to serve with you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you all. Docket number 0309, communication was received from President Campbell offering her support and partnership effort with the MBTA and City of Boston to increase resident access to offer Charlie card pickups at Boston City Hall.
Docket 0309 will be placed on file. Moving on to motions, orders, and resolutions.
Docket number 0310, Councilor Baker offered the following order approving a petition for a special law regarding an act concerning the retirement classification for Boston school police officers.
Councilor Baker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I've been filing this home rule petition since 2015. This is a bill, an act relative to the retirement classification of Boston school officers. It would amend the Massachusetts general laws to specifically add Boston school police officers to Group 2 in retirement. Currently, Boston school police officers fall under Group 1, which mainly consists of clerical and administrative workers. Other public safety officers in the City of Boston are classified in Group 2 by the Retirement Board. Boston school police officers carry handcuffs and mace and are licensed under BPD Rule 400A as special police officers. They have the powers to make arrests, preserve order, and enforce the law of our Commonwealth. They are trained by the Boston Police Department, the National Association of School Resource Officers, and complete a Boston Special Officers Training Academy prior to being assigned to one of our middle or high school campuses. I believe that because of the training they complete and the duties that they are expected to perform, the Boston School Police Officers should be assigned to Group 2. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Anyone else looking to speak on this matter? Councilor Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to add, respectfully ask to add my name. Madam President, I had the opportunity to serve as a substitute school teacher at South Boston High School and Charlestown High School, and I saw the professionalism of these police officers. They do outstanding work. They're dedicated. They do their best to help the students and staff, and they're a great credit to our city. And I strongly support the proposal by City Councilor Frank Baker. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Madam Clerk, if you could add Councilor Flynn's name. Anyone else looking to add their name? Also add Councilor Siomo, Councilor Edwards, Councilor Garrison, Councilor McCarthy, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Wu, Councilor Zakum, Councilor Sabi George, Councilor Flaherty, as well as the Chair, and Councilor Janey. At this time, docket 0310 will be assigned to the Committee on Government Operations.
Docket number 0311, Councilor Campbell offered the following order approving a petition for a special law regarding an act for the term of office for city councilors.
Chair recognizes Council President Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I'm filing today 4 measures, and I can speak to them separately, that all have to deal with elections and election reform for the council. It's important to me as council president, not only, of course, to raise the profile of my district, including Dorchester and Mattapan, which is important to me, but also to strengthen the council as an institution. And so these forms of legislation, 3 of which are home rule petitions, 1 is an ordinance, are to strengthen the council. The first one has to do with the terms of the city council, changing it from 2 years to 4 years, so it aligns with the mayor's office. This is something we heard quite a bit when we were campaigning. Folks talking about why is the council every 2 years and the mayor's office every 4 years? How do you get anything done? How do you plan if it's only for 2 years? This isn't just about increasing our power. It's really about making sure that we have the time to accomplish the goals that we commit to as candidates, and making sure that we have the ability to plan and to get things done. This body passed in previous years home rule petitions on this subject, including as recently as 2016 under the leadership of Councilor Baker. It then went to the State House, and it died, frankly. And so this was an opportunity for me to take the lead in strengthening the council as an institution, passing these bills together, and then hopefully when we go to the State House, we're advocating for all of these bills at the same time. We recently had a conversation on early voting and the importance of doing early voting. I did that, of course, in partnership with Councillor Janey and Councillor Zakem. The goal is to also pass that through the council and to send all of these bills to the State House at the same time with the hopes of actually getting them passed up there. And specifically with the changing of the terms, it costs the city more than $800,000 to hold a citywide election. In municipal election years in which the city council is the only office on the ballot, voter turnout is at its lowest. It's usually less than 10%. And we're not going to change that overnight. And so this is an opportunity not just to change the terms so they align with the mayor's office and strengthen the council and the autonomy around the council, but also to save the city money. We know that folks get frustrated having to possibly come out and vote in so many different elections. We get a lot of questions as to why they're just voting for a council and not the mayor. This would align all of the practices at the same time. I will talk about the other bills as they come up, but this is one of many to strengthen the council. And I look forward to the partnership of every one of my colleagues with respect to this piece of legislation and the next three that I'll talk about in a minute. So thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Chair recognizes Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. I rise to have my name added. I don't know where you were about 5 weeks ago. This has no effect on me anymore. What's going on? I've always thought that the 4-year term is absolutely imperative to not only saving the city money, but to getting better quality candidates every 4 years. Some people would argue that having the election every 2 years is easier for people to run against you. I believe it's just the opposite. When you have a 4-year term, people can start gearing up 2 years into your term and really get momentum to take a swing at you later on. I believe that having a 4-year term, whether it's during the mayor's election or a legislative off year, however it works, is imperative to making sure that you can work through a process. And I think we all talk about development in our neighborhoods. It's arguably our biggest issue besides traffic. And from conception to shovel in the ground to completion sometimes takes 3 or 4 years. You can't see a process through. And if you happen to be in support of a development that people aren't in favor of, you have to step back and think about whether or not this is the political capital you're going to spend here. And I think when you have a 4-year term, it's much easier to spend that capital because when people see the finished product, good, bad, or indifferent, they appreciate the project that you've done. So I look forward to working with the council president and the rest of the city council on trying to get this through. We'll see what the State House does with it.
Thank you, Councilor McCarthy. Please add Councilor McCarthy's name. Docket, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We did pass this a couple years ago, and quite frankly, I think we were kind of spinning our wheels up there. Hopefully, if we pass it again, then maybe when I say we can get this through the State House. I don't really have high hopes to get it through the State House, but we can, I guess, keep going at them. So I just want to add my name to it and to add a point on to Tim. I'm going to a meeting tonight of a project that started. I'm in my 8th year on the City Council. I'm going to a meeting tonight of a project that started 6 years ago. And we still don't have shovels in the ground, so just a little perspective there. Thank you.
Thank you. Please add Councilor Baker's name, and please add the chair's name. Please add the names of Councilor Flynn, Councilor Janey, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Edwards, and Councilor Asabi George as well. And please put docket 0311 in the Committee on Government Operations.
Docket number 0312, Councilor Campbell offered the following order, approving a petition for a special law regarding an act relative to election procedures in the city of Boston.
Chair recognizes Council President Campbell.
Thank you. It would have been easier to talk about these all at the same time. It's difficult given the rules and process. But this rule is quite simple. It's another rule that I think will strengthen the council. It prohibits a candidate or any candidate from running for 2 seats at the same time. That is, you can't run for council and mayor at the same time. This body passed this legislation previously. It went up to the State House and it died. And so we're filing it again with the hopes that if we send all these bills together at the same time, they will go up to the State House and they will pass. And it's quite simple. I mean, I ran against my predecessor, obviously, who ran for mayor and the council at the same time, which frustrated some of the voters. For me, it's pick whatever seat you want to run for and run for that and run for it hard and speak to the voters as to why you want that seat, not both. We do different things on either side, and so I think it's important that you select the office and go for it. So this is just another mechanism, I think, to strengthen the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. Please add the chair's name. Please add Councilor Baker's name, Councilor Asabi George, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Janey, Councilor McCarthy, Councilor Zakem, and docket 0312 will be placed in the Committee of Government Operations.
Docket number 0313, Councilor Campbell offered the following order approving a petition for a special law regarding an act concerning a vacancy in the office of City Councilor at Large.
Chair recognizes Councilor Campbell.
That's okay.
Let's leave this on.
Is it on?
Thank you, Councilor Siomo. Another rule that I think will strengthen the council as well, and it has to go through the State House. This is something that, under the leadership of, I believe, Councilor Baker and Councilor O'Malley in the past, died at the State House, and so we're bringing it back. And it's simple. It says that if there is a vacancy in a seat, particularly the at-large seat, that process, there has to be a special election, that you don't just take the next voter. And I have to name this. This is not to call out my new colleague, Councilor Garrison. This has nothing to do with Councilor Garrison. Right now, if you're a district councilor and I were to say vacate my seat, you have to have a special election. So we think that those processes should be aligned and should be the same for both an at-large seat as well as a special district seat. There will be a hearing on this. We will have a conversation, but this is something that also passed through the council previously, died at the State House, and so the goal is to also renew this conversation and hopefully get it passed through the council and sent up to the State House at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Please add my name and Councilor Garrison. You have the floor. Sign on. Councilor Garrison wishes to sign on.
No wishes to speak.
Speak? Okay. Chair recognizes Councilor Garrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Siomo, and my good friend over there. I think this law should remain as is. It is an expense. If you call it special election, that means you have to pay an expense. The fifth person has already went through the election cycle, so that person should continue to, if someone resign or die or whatever, the fifth person should get the seat. So I rise in opposition to this particular.
Thank you, Councilor Garrison. Please add the names of Councilor O'Malley, Councilor McCarthy, Councilor Janey, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Edwards, Councilor Baker, and Councilor Siomo, too, please. Docket 0313 will be placed in the Committee on Government Operations.
Docket number 0314, Councilor Campbell offered the following ordinance requiring the review of precincts in the City of Boston.
Chair recognizes Councilor Campbell.
I just asked for the new language and substitution to add Councilor Wu as a co-sponsor in this ordinance.
In absence of objection, please add Councilor Wu's name.
And thank you, Councilor Wu, for your partnership on this. We have been in many conversations, and along with others on the council, including some of our predecessors, with respect to re-precincting and adjusting precinct sizes so that it's easier for folks to vote, to get to voting. We have new neighborhoods, frankly, in the city of Boston, including the Seaport. I grew up in the city. That didn't exist before. It now does. And when you are increasing the population of folks in the city of Boston, we're growing our population or making and creating new neighborhoods, that means it has effect on people's ability to access the polls. And so currently, unlike most municipalities in Massachusetts, the city of Boston is exempt from reviewing electoral precincts or doing re-precincting every 10 years. And so we've been having conversations with various advocates, when I say we, Councilor Wu and I, about how can we get these precincts adjusted so it's easier for folks to go to the polls and vote and not have to wait in long lines, and also have a place close to their home to vote. And out of these conversations, many of the advocates have said, we need to have these conversations more consistently. And so this ordinance, which does not have to go through the State House, allows us to require the council in partnership with the Elections Division to have that conversation about re-precincting, to review our precincts every few years. The ordinance says 5 years, it could be 3, it could be a different term, but to require us to review the precincts, to determine if we need to be making changes as a council, as a city, and then to put our report as to what those recommendations are. Those changes would then possibly have to go, to, of course, to the State House, but there's also been some conversation that the City of Boston at different times does have authority possibly to change precincts on its own without going through the State House. So I look forward to having a hearing on this and inviting our commissioner, who's also looked at this and thought it wasn't a bad idea, our Commissioner of Elections, I mean, and to have a conversation with him about how we mandate that the City of Boston do a more thorough analysis and a more consistent review of these precincts so that folks don't have a tough time when going to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. Chair recognizes Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. I wanted to, I'm sorry, actually I'm going to go ahead and waive my time to the co-sponsor of this, and then I'll speak after Councilor Wu.
Okay. Councilor Wu, sorry about that.
No, I forgot to push it. I was trying to do a last-minute finger push there. I want to thank President Campbell for including me on this and for the work of many advocates and councilors who've been talking about redistricting and re-precincting for, I think, probably 2 or 3 iterations before I even arrived at the council. Councilor Flynn has also been really involved in these particular discussions because many of the mega precincts, we'll call them, are in his district, the largest ones that have, 6,000 some voters in Chinatown and Bay Village and sort of Fort Point, Seaport, South Boston precincts compared to just a couple hundred voters in other precincts across the city. So I have learned a great deal about this subject since diving in, and what we know is that there's actually a very compressed and stressfully limited window for the City of Boston to fully do re-precincting. So because we have not done it in almost 90 years at this point, and the imbalances are so large, the window in which everyone else does re-precincting, which is right after the census data comes back, which will be in 2021, but before redistricting is mandated to be done sometime around 2022, 2023, it's really only a couple of months that we have to do this whole process of thinking about potentially erasing all the lines and reconfiguring them. So to make that even a little bit feasible, the City of Boston needs to take steps even before the census data comes back to start making small adjustments. Councilor Linehan and Commissioner Irish had led the charge on trying to identify the 6 biggest precincts and suggest ways to break them down into 2 or 3 sub-precincts now so that we could at least have separate polling locations and give people more access. Again, it went to the State House after this body voted on it and did not go anywhere. So there will be, I think, a renewed push. The mayor had already included that in his legislative package this cycle, and it's really important to try to get that done before 2020. We hope there will be a massive influx of voters in 19, but I think the odds are that the long lines will be the year after, so we have a little bit of time. In the meantime, something like an ordinance to require that we build in this regular review is really important. And what I love about the council president's approach is that this keeps Boston's exemptions. If we were to dive into what everyone else does statewide, it would go into the hands of the Secretary of State, and we'd be subject to a lot less flexibility. So just like our zoning code is adapted to Boston specifics, this process should be adapted to Boston specifics. And in addition to this, we have a lot of work to do in thinking about how to make some of these small adjustments under Councilor Flynn's leadership and the state delegation, state's Boston delegation to get that done. But thank you for your partnership. Looking forward to this.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. I rise to support the makers of this bill, and I completely agree. I think what's really important is setting up an infrastructure for a regular conversation so that we are informed and ready to go when that window opens for the City of Boston. I'm particularly excited about this because I see the massive amounts of development. I think we'll be able to one day compete with my colleague Councilor Flynn for one of the largest precincts, as we're seeing very soon. We're working on the zoning for Suffolk Downs, and we're going to see in phase in 5 or 6 phases, one of the largest neighborhoods to be built in East Boston. And again, making sure that we are adjusting and looking at the precincts as that is growing, because large developments don't happen overnight. They happen in phases. So that's how precincts grow. And so just to have the regular check-in every 4 to 5 years is good for the phase development, as we heard from my colleague, Councilor Baker. It could take 6, 7, 8 years before something to start, and then once it's going, you have a whole new neighborhood. I also looked at Charlestown. We are going to be redeveloping the largest housing development in New England, and doubling its size and making sure we also have more folks just in that 1 square mile. That alone, that controversy alone, again, being able to review as the phase-in of that large population comes in, is really important that our election laws are creating a structure also to recognize our growing populations. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you. Would you like to add your name, Council?
Yes.
Please add Councilor Edwards' name. Anyone else? Please add Councilor Janey, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Zachem, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Asabi George, Councilor Baker, and the Chair, and Councilor Flaherty. Docket 0313 will be put in the Committee on Government Operations.
0314.
I'm sorry, 0314.
Docket number 0315, Councilor Janey offered the following: an ordinance establishing equitable regulations on the cannabis industry in the city of Boston.
Councilor Janey, you have the floor.
Wait a second. Thank you, Madam President. And first, let me begin by thanking the many advocates and entrepreneurs, many of whom are in this room this afternoon, for sharing their experiences and ideas throughout previous hearings and working sessions. Their participation in this process has helped to shape this ordinance. I also want to thank Councilor McCarthy for partnering with me to reintroduce this issue this year. He and Congresswoman Presley sponsored a hearing order last year on this topic, and we know that Congresswoman Presley's advocacy while a member of this body to establish equity within the liquor licenses illustrates the importance of acting now to ensure equity in the emerging cannabis industry so that we get it right at the beginning. Additionally, I want to thank my amazing staff. In particular, I want to publicly acknowledge Noah Coolidge, who is my policy director. He was very instrumental in helping to draft this legislation. Thank you, Noah, and to my whole team. As the chair of Small Business and Consumer Affairs, I held a hearing in December on equity in cannabis. We heard testimony from Chief Barrows, from Chief Smith, as well as Alexis Tachuk and Selena Barrios-Milner. I want to thank the mayor and his team for their expressed support for equity in this industry. At that hearing, we also heard from Shalene Title of the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, former City Councilor Tito Jackson, who is here today, and Councilor J.T. Scott of Somerville, all who shared models of success and ideas for implementing equity in Boston. So I want to thank them for sharing their expertise throughout the process. Last month, I had a listening session to hear from advocates and entrepreneurs as well. Today, I am proud to introduce an ordinance which will establish an equity program for Boston, including priority for locally owned businesses from impacted communities, offer support and technical assistance for equity applicants, generate revenue to be reinvested into communities to support small business development, create a board to oversee the process, involve residents in developing host community agreements, and create an online registry to ensure clarity and transparency in this process. This is important because for generations, the war on drugs targeted and criminalized poor communities of color, causing economic devastation, family separation, and emotional trauma. According to the NAACP, African Americans and whites use drugs at similar rates, but the imprisonment rate of African Americans for drug charges is almost 6 times that of whites. Ensuring equity in this emerging industry will help us correct the harms and right the wrongs that have been inflicted by mass incarceration. As I've said before, we need to make sure that communities that have been locked up are not locked out of this economic opportunity. This industry will generate enormous wealth. In just the first 10 weeks of operation, cannabis sales have generated $27.9 million in revenue across the Commonwealth, almost $30 million. As the cannabis industry grows, it's imperative that the economic benefits are directed to the communities that have for far too long been negatively impacted by the war on drugs and racist discriminatory policies. Massachusetts has taken some important steps through core reform and the recent criminal justice reform legislation, but that is not enough. In 2016, Massachusetts passed legislation to legalize, tax, and regulate adult-use marijuana, with 62% of Boston voting overwhelmingly supporting this proposal. We have seen with liquor licenses what can happen when the industry is allowed to develop without intention of promoting equity, where people of color are then locked out. We cannot let that happen again. We must honor the spirit of the law and ensure that there is equity at the local level. Without a sufficient program in place, we will squander this opportunity to make progress in eliminating the enormous wealth gap in Boston. To date, no minority-owned businesses have been approved by the state, not a single one. And few, if any, have negotiated their host community agreements with the City of Boston. In accordance with state law, the City of Boston will have a minimum of 50 marijuana businesses. That means each neighborhood in our city is likely to have 2 marijuana establishments. As shops open up in our city, it's imperative that we be intentional in ensuring that the process is fair, just, and equitable. This ordinance would create a city-level equity program which gives preference to local businesses from communities disproportionately impacted and would give a 2-year priority period for equity applicants to move through the process. After that period, it would require a 2-to-1 ratio of equity cannabis businesses to non-equity cannabis businesses to make sure that equity remains a central focus of this regulation in the long term. This ordinance also creates a program to offer these equity applicants technical assistance, operational support, and business development resources, something that is not available to them now through the federally funded programs offered by the city. This program will be funded directly by license fees and the city's share of the tax revenue to support equity applicants and minority-owned businesses. This ordinance would also change the way the city reviews cannabis applications. It would create a new board, a Boston Cannabis Board, appointed by, in part, the mayor, as well as this body, the City Council. This new board would be responsible for licensing cannabis businesses, supporting equity-owned businesses, and ensuring that businesses are operating safely with no sales to minors. It places formal responsibility for negotiating host community agreements with the Office of Neighborhood Services and district city councilors. Finally, in order to make sure this industry is as transparent as possible, the ordinance would create an online registry and mapping of cannabis businesses operating in our city, including ownership and investor information. We have a chance to get the cannabis industry right from the beginning. If you remember back in 2015, the Color of Wealth report by the Federal Reserve Bank noted the wealth gap in Boston. That report is almost 5 years old. That was 2015, we're in 2019, where we saw $8 of wealth for black families in Boston versus $247,500 for white families. If we do not act, we run the risk of having all of the larger corporations come into our city, set up shop, and we're going to be locking out people in our community, people who are from our community who want to get into this business. We can have equity and move forward quickly. The two are not mutually exclusive. And we can do so with a sense of purpose, but it requires that we be intentional. I look forward to engaging my colleagues, the administration, and all the key stakeholders as this process moves forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Janey. Thank you, Councilor Janey, and I know your mom is here, so I'm sure she's very proud. Councilor Edwards, you have the floor.
Actually, Councilor, okay.
Oh.
I rise to commend the maker and her leadership. I am so incredibly proud of your taking this taking this bull by the horns and essentially saying there shall be equity from the very beginning. I know you're taking a bold step, and I want you to know I'm 100% right there with you in every shape every way, research whatever you need. I am so proud of you and what you're doing today. You are making history, and what you're doing is an example of true leadership. You are setting a table where all are welcome to come in and figure out how we do this right. If we do not do this, we will demonstrate that after all the hearings, all the ordinances, after all the home rules, we have learned nothing from the liquor license debacle that we are still trying to correct. What I see in this ordinance is that you have seen and learned from those conversations and saying, we will not be trying to correct 100 years later this lopsided licensing debacle that we have right now. Instead, we're going to learn from the very beginning that when policy is implemented to hurt communities, the right response is policy that's implemented to help them heal. This is what you are doing. This is what you are doing. And I want to say that also you are setting a precedent for how we are telling companies and corporations to come into Boston. That's what this can do as well. We will learn how to talk to them and set standards in a way that is led by the communities that are in need of the jobs, led by the communities that are the ones who are disproportionately locked out of those jobs, and making sure that Boston is setting a true standard for what it means to be a good neighbor. Not just how we can give tax breaks to these corporations, but truly how to make them and integrate them into our communities. This is going to set that precedent for any industry that comes behind, whether it's scooters, whether it's the ferry system, whatever system that is coming to Boston to grow here, this kind of conversation that you are setting will help to make that true. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much for your leadership. I look forward to fighting with you for this. And also, I want to say to the advocates who have been out there, who've met with us, who've talked with us, I just want to acknowledge the youth in the room that have been a part of that, the young people who have certainly been at the helm to do this, who simply want to make sure that we are setting up a standard that they can contribute to, that our children's children can contribute to, that we can look back on this moment and said, we did it right. So thank you so much, Councilor Janey. Thank you so much, and I look forward to this hearing and to getting this done.
Councilor Edwards, would like to add your name?
Absolutely.
Madam Clerk, if you could add Councilor Edwards. Councilor Wu, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I also rise to stand in strong support of my sister here and her incredible ordinance. This can't come a moment too soon. We are already in the mad rush of applicants and proposals and often competing for the same few spots and few licenses. And whenever that is the case, guess who's gonna win out? Those with resources, those who come with the backing, often the national or multinational corporations that are coming in, rather than what we are trying to do here is create opportunity for local entrepreneurs, local residents. We saw it with the rollout of the medical marijuana industry in terms of how expensive the applications were, who got them, what you have to do, all the hoops to jump through. And now we are, what you said, $27.9 million into seeing it roll out with the legalization of adult use as well. So I am very excited to see you put details and something that would add structure to the process just in general. But on top of that, as Councilor Edwards so eloquently said, this is how we should be legislating all the time, with values, with the ultimate vision in front of us, and I'm very grateful for your leadership.
Councilor Wu, would you like to add your name as well?
Yes, please have my name.
Madam Clerk, if you could add Councilor Wu. Councilor Zakem, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to add my voice to the chorus of applause to our good colleague for tackling such an important issue. I think hardly a week goes by where there is not some new applicant or entrepreneur or someone who is testing the waters, whether it's in one of my neighborhood associations or here in this building on a dispensary of some kind in the city and certainly in District 8. And it's important that we're deliberate about this. It's important, number one, that there is a framework, that there is some sort of objective standards, that people know what the process is in the city of Boston, that we should be leading the Commonwealth on this, so thank you for that. But really, why this is so important and why I think we need to move quickly on this is because this is a real rare opportunity to put our money where our mouth is. We talk about equity almost every day in this chamber, and all of us do, and all of us care about that, and all of us were elected and campaigned and work every day to achieve that. But given the state of our nation, given the issues of the economy of haves and have-nots, of our limited authority in many ways to directly attack this. We sometimes are here and we talk about it and we do what we can, but this is something, given the highly regulated nature of this industry, given the immense authority that under the state law, through the referendum process, cities and towns have over this, we can be deliberate. We can say we are going to use our authority to achieve equity, to make sure that we are going to do something, not just because this is the marijuana industry, not just because of the horrible legacy of the war on drugs and people have been incarcerated and subjected to mistreatment, but because of the broader issues in our economy, from the Color of Wealth report that you referenced, from the things we see every day in the city of Boston. So I want to thank you for doing this. This is a complicated bill. It's not easy to put together. It's not easy to legislate something, especially in an industry that's in its infancy like this. So thank you for taking this on. I look forward to partnering with you, with our colleagues, with the administration, with people in this industry and people who want to be in this industry to make sure that in the city of Boston, at least, we're going to be leaders, not just on transparency, not just on entrepreneurship and innovation, but in equity as well. So thank you. I look forward to working on this with you, with our colleagues, and add my name, please.
Thank you, Councilor Zachem. Madam Clerk, if you could also add Councilor Zachem, Councilor Sabi George, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Flynn, Councilor McCarthy, Councilor O'Malley, as well as the chair. Councilor Siomo? Okay, Councilor Siomo. Councilor O'Malley, did you want to speak? Okay. And I just want to echo what's been said. Councilor Janey, thank you for your leadership on this. Congresswoman Presley would be so proud that you've continued this. You didn't let it die. I look forward to working in partnership with you on getting this passed. We really just want to applaud your leadership as well. So thank you. At this time, docket 0315 will be placed in the Committee on Government Operations.
Docket number 0316, Councilors Campbell and O'Malley offer the following order for a hearing to discuss strategies to reduce and activate vacant residential properties in the city of Boston.
Chair recognizes Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo. This is like musical chair. I first want to thank Councilor O'Malley and Councilor Janey, but before we proceed, we would like to suspend Rule 12 and add Councilor Janey as a co-sponsor.
Seeing and hearing no objections, please add Councilor Janey's name.
Thank you. So I started this conversation actually with Councilor O'Malley last year, and we did a joint hearing looking at vacant lots in the city of Boston. Let me not let folks leave. I think we're good. All right, I think we're good. We started this conversation last year with a joint hearing on looking at the vacant lots that are both commercial and residential vacant lots in the city of Boston. And to my shock, when we got the data specifically for the residential lots and the city-owned lots in particular, the overwhelming amount of vacant city-owned residential parcels were in Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury. And we're talking that in the thousands. These are not counting the privately owned lots that are blighted or where nothing is sort of happening. I have one such lot behind my house in Mattapan where I live. It is privately owned. I know the owner. I talk to him all the time. No one lives there. It literally is just, it's an eyesore to the neighborhood and has been that way for over 4 years. And so we renewed this hearing order to specifically just talk about the residential lots, not the commercial lots, and to really start with those that are city-owned. Right now, in the city of Boston, there are roughly almost 1,300 city-owned vacant lots. There's no database and very limited data on the privately owned lots. But we said, you know what, there's enough of an issue with the city-owned lots that we should focus on those. And like I said, we pulled in Councilor Janey into this conversation because the majority of those lots are in Mattapan, Dorchester, and Roxbury. And every single day we're talking about in this body or at hearings the need for more affordable housing. We're talking about more housing for our veterans, more affordable housing for our seniors. And it's shocking to me that we don't have a plan or a strategy to activate these city-owned vacant lots for the city of Boston. Housing could go there or something else more creative. After our conversation that we had last year, actually, a friend of mine who lives in Amsterdam, but who went to Wentworth, who happened to be visiting back in Boston, said, I want to be helpful in the work. And we talked about vacant lots. And he says, in Amsterdam, we've been activating lots all the time. We do art, we do different things to make these spaces come alive while we develop a long-term plan and strategy for these lots. We are partnering, and actually with Wentworth, partnering to go into District 4 to look at city-owned lots, particularly in Dorchester and Mattapan, that are vacant, to activate those spaces with the recommendations of the residents in the community that live in that area. We're asking community residents, what do you want to see on this lot? And we're going to make it happen. And I'm telling Chief Dillon and others in the city of Boston, this is no cost to the city to activate these spaces. And so there are already many of us on this body who are doing creative things in the city and in our district to activate these spaces. The question is, what is the city as a whole doing? So this is a hearing to explore strategies to reduce these vacancies, to activate the spaces, and also to look at existing solutions. So we have a problem properties task force. I think everyone on this body calls the task force all the time to say, I have these properties in my neighborhood that are causing blight or that are centers of crime. We need the task force to step up, and that means we might have to strengthen that task force to respond. There used to be a clean it or lean it program where folks in Public Works, I'm looking at Councilor McCarthy, who used to obviously be at Public Works, where you could go on these lots and actually clean it up or you'd get ticketed. That program was dissolved at some point. Maybe we need to bring that back. There's also other cities and municipalities across the country that are using financial incentives, whether it's taxing folks who have these vacant lots, particularly the privately owned lots, and saying, if you're not going to do something with it, we're going to tax you with the hopes that maybe we will incentivize you to develop it, sell it, or do something with it. But we're not going to accept private owners just leaving blighted properties left unattended in the city of Boston to be an eyesore or frankly useless to the folks who live in that community. There are other communities such as New York and DC that are looking at creating land banks. I don't think we necessarily need a land bank because we have the BPDA, but the BPDA needs to be involved in these conversations as well. All these city-owned lots, they have resources, they do zoning, they do development projects. What's their strategy to activate these spaces? And lastly, I'll say we ask our residents, particularly in Dorchester and Mattapan that I represent, to step up, to come to the council, to advocate, to show up. And they do. And they're waiting for us to show up. These vacant lots where nothing is happening, people have been calling the city often for years saying, I live next to a city-owned parcel that's been vacant for 10 years. And you don't even maintain it well. They want us to step up and act, and I think we need to do our part. So this hearing is the beginning of a conversation, excited to do in partnership with Councilor Janey and O'Malley. We're really excited to get the city to actually do better with respect to these vacant lots and saying it's unacceptable that they're largely in communities of color and communities that are concentrated in poverty. We can't be a part of the problem. We need to be a part of the solution. So thank you, and thank you, Councilor O'Malley and Councilor Janey, for the partnership.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I begin by thanking my dear colleagues and friend, the Council President and the District 7 Councilor from Roxbury for their partnership and leadership on this issue. This is actually a fascinating topic and a very, very important topic that this body can play a profoundly impactful role on. When we began work looking at vacancies, we did a catch-all, as the Council President said, on commercial and residential. There's really sort of three buckets we're talking about here. There's there's the commercial vacancy that we see in our local business districts, which has a profoundly negative impact in surrounding businesses. A business can see up to a 25% decrease in business when it's vacant. Then it's sort of the high-end luxury housing vacancy, where oftentimes a more reliable and lucrative investment, quite often with foreign investment, is in some of these high-end luxury buildings, which I know a good colleague and friend, the councilor, district councilor from East Boston, has been tackling as well. And then the third is this notion of these sometimes city-owned lots, these empty lots, sometimes these buildings that have remained empty for years, sometimes even decades. And what's sort of the interesting, or perhaps the unusual or counterintuitive economic understanding of this is that this is happening amidst Boston's biggest building boom and economic thrivingness of any time in any recent history. The real estate market has never been stronger. We've got a profoundly powerful real estate market. It is why we are spending most of our nights, particularly my district colleagues and I, out at development meetings each and every night of the week. So it seems counterintuitive that we still have these vacant spots when the market is so good. It's not as though there's not interest in developing these lots. It's not as though there aren't businesses that want to come here, but you often have cases of a landlord who will make the determination that he or she will get more money by keeping a space vacant and holding up for a higher paying tenant. Quite often someone in the cannabis industry now, which is fetching 4, 5, 6 times the amount of rent of sort of a more, I guess, mainstream, although what's mainstream these days, brick and mortar, mom and pop type business. Then with the luxury stuff, you have got, as I said, people who make the determination that a $3.5 million condo, in my dear colleague from Back Bay's district, is going to be a lot more beneficial to hold on to that and less volatile than the stock market. Then you've got this third aspect. And I think the approach to dealing with all three of them is somewhat similar, but we need to be different in our tactics to address that, which is why I'm so delighted the council president, when we were talking about this, said let's focus specifically on these lots, let's focus specifically on these residential buildings as well, because we have an opportunity to actually collect some good data here. That should be a minimum. I think the data is subpar thus far. We have an opportunity to really think of some good incentives for these. Clean It or Lean It was a program that worked. There was great partnerships. Years ago, I worked for our former sheriff, Andrea Cabral. There was some great partnerships with the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. I'm sure Sheriff Tompkins would continue that and is continuing that. There's ways that we can incentivize the landlord or the owner to make sure that it is a safe, clean place. There's ways that we can expedite that process, because one of the most maddening things that I've been dealing with, and we can all of us, can point to several examples in our districts of these problem properties that have remained that way for years. And residents don't want to sit here, there's only so much we can do. We can find them. We can try housing corp, but that never works. That's just a delay tactic. So we need to be a little more nimble, a little more aggressive in our approach. And then thirdly, we have to have a tough conversation on the stick. We talk about the carrot, we talk about incentives to help them, but there should be some benefits, or there should be some consequences when they don't add up. So I want to close by saying a very wise man once said that what matters to you is what matters when we look out our front door. I was going to begin my speech that way, but he stepped out for a minute. He is right, and we have an opportunity to really not only affect something that has a profound quality of life impact on all of us, but is what we ought to be focusing on. So I'm delighted for the partnership. Look forward to continuing to get to work. It makes sense to sort of compartmentalize each of these issues as we go forward. We'll be continuing work on the commercial vacancy and some of the high-end luxury vacancy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. Councilor Janey, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. First, let me just say thank you to Councilor Matt O'Malley and Council President Campbell for adding me to this important hearing order. They really kind of summed it up, and so I just would like to offer a particular case study in my district that has been just an awful player when we're talking about vacant lots. So certainly there are lost opportunity in terms of affordable housing. I think you've already heard that. Commercial space or innovation that we want to see in our district. There's a particular lot in Grove Hall right next to the historic Freedom House. Between April 2011 and November 2018, so a 7-year period, it racked up a whopping $7,525 in code enforcement violations, none of which have been collected by the city. So 7 years of being a bad player collecting fines, $7,000 of fines that have not been collected from the city. They've been cited 95 times for improper storage of trash, 75 times for overgrown weeds, and 22 times for failure to remove snow from sidewalks. There's small fines, $15, $25, $50, sometimes $100, but the average has been about $40 for over 200 citations. This is just one lot in my district in Grove Hall. And I can't remember there ever being anything on this lot other than weeds and trash. So I definitely want us to take action. I think there are certainly solutions to these challenges. I was a fan of the Clean It or Lean It program. I certainly would like to have a discussion about bringing that back or something similar so that communities are not forced to kind of live with this blight. I think it's really unfair in terms of their quality of life, but particularly when we know folks are just sitting on these properties waiting for the values to increase so that they can sell them and get this giant windfall for being a bad player. We should not be rewarding bad players with a giant windfall. We should be doing more to take control of these lands, the vacant lots, if they won't. So anyway, I look forward to having the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Edwards, you have the floor.
And I commend the makers on their leadership and this conversation on vacancy. I had talked specifically about, during I think a previous hearing, about how even a case study in East Boston, the Loft Hotel is probably one of the larger cases that we see on a daily basis that impacts everybody coming down Route 1A in our neighborhood and Jeffries Point. It is a hollowed out hotel, several, 75 feet high. It is just concrete with plastic blowing to and fro, with cardboard, if not maybe some drywall, some sort of windows. But ultimately, it's been sitting like that for 10 years. It was sold for $2 million and $12 million. We captured none of that income, of which we would have if we passed the speculator tax, just putting in a word for the transfer fee. But also, it just sits there continually. The owners live in Sudbury and some other suburb. They've done nothing really to correct it. The debris blows on you if you're running on the Greenway, by the way. You can get a mouthful of all the stuff that comes on there. They don't take care of the land, and we have to look at that. Now, they have taken so long in passing ownership to ownership that the permits that they had to correct those problems have now expired. They have to start all over again and get new counsel to hopefully fix this issue. And the problem I have with that is that we do have currently in policy a receivership program in the city of Boston that works with the Attorney General's office that would allow local folks and a receiver to step up to the plate. And it's underutilized, and I'd like in this hearing when we talk about this to talk about how we can really support that program where local folks getting a receiver can go in there with paintbrushes, with broomsticks, with whatever it takes to make the lot better, and ultimately can then get a lien on that house with their receipts for how much it cost them to do that. And then if that lot is ever sold, or if that goes into foreclosure, they get their money back. But the neighborhood essentially rises up with a receiver and gets to it. And we have this program, I think we have less than 100 properties in it, but I think that's something that's worth talking about. This is a program that exists. We talked briefly about it in the land disposition hearing with Commissioner Christopher. And I think we need to continue to talk about this, as vacancies with these absentee landlords especially are the ones where when processes failed the community. So if we have a process that can respond to that, we need to support it as a city council.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Would you like to add your name?
Yes.
Please add Councilor Edwards' name. Please add Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Flynn, Councilor McCarthy, Councilor Wu, Councilor Zakem, Councilor Baker, and Councilor Asabi George, and Councilor Siomo. Docket 0316 will be assigned to the Committee on Housing and Community Development.
Docket number 0317, Councilors Campbell and Flaherty offer the following resolution in support of House Docket 2835 and Senate Docket 746, an act to sustain community preservation.
Chair recognizes Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo, and thank you, Councilor Flaherty, for your continued partnership on this, and also to Sheikh in your office, who did work on this. This is pretty self-explanatory. We've passed this before. Obviously, the Community Preservation Act, I don't think we need to talk about how incredible that has been for the city of Boston. It was really frankly happy to partner with Councilor Flaherty in my first term, and of course with all the advocates and all of you in getting that passed in the city of Boston. And we have Christine, who is the executive director of the committee, who is here and who does incredible work. But this money is being used for resident-driven projects, for housing, historic preservation, parks, and it's just amazing. The continued advocacy that is necessary around this is really at the State House. Right now, there's a bill in the State House that would increase the matching fund so that the money that the city of Boston puts into the CPA is matched by the state at a higher level. And so this resolution is an opportunity for us to say, not only do we support this bill, we want the State House to move on this, to increase this match, so that all of the municipalities, and at this point over 160 in Massachusetts, that have adopted the CPA can seize more money from the state in terms of that match. I think every municipality that has adopted this program will speak to how powerful it is, not only engaging our residents in the work, creating projects and building projects that they actually want, and how it brings folks into government. It's a win-win. And so this resolution, which we're asking that we suspend the rules today and adopt, is an opportunity for us to add our voice to the conversation at the State House and to hopefully push the state to increase that match and to do so in short order. So thank you, and thank you, Councilor Flaherty, for your partnership.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and obviously thank you to the Council President for the continued partnership where we're not only calling upon the state to work with the City Council, but we're also advocating on behalf of all the municipalities across the Commonwealth to increase the amount of CPA matching funds. As Council President Campbell had described, and I know we as mentioned, we're joined by CPA Director Christine Poff, who's doing a great job managing the whole CPA program. So round of applause for Christine, who's here, who does some great work. So, we did the pilot. Round one was the pilot, which we distributed a little over $8 million to 35 shovel-ready projects. We have a bigger round of funding underway now for round two that's going to have a heavy lean on affordable housing, which is great. So we're going to continue to work with the director as well as our constituents across the city. But the interesting piece about this is that despite the ongoing rapid growth and development of our city, we're currently waiting. It's been over 18 years for there to be an update with respect to the revenue that's acquired through the Registry of Deed filings. That's just inexcusable and too long for us to get an update. So if we can get that update as quickly as possible, this proposed legislation, as described by our colleague, has over 100 sponsors between the House and Senate. So I'm assuming that through the chair and the lead sponsor, we would probably want to move for suspension and adoption today. So with that, I'd urge my colleagues to do the same, that we're expecting to, that it be assigned to a committee and that they have an expedited hearing up at Beacon Hill, because it doesn't just affect Boston. It affects everyone, every municipality and city and town that's passed this across the Commonwealth, and much deserved additional match funding is in the pipeline, but we need to get it through. And I know that Governor Baker has signaled his support for such a proposal. So I think that for the first time we have sort of mutual agreement between municipalities, our colleagues up at the State House, and obviously the Chief Executive. And if we can get an expedited hearing and get this on the books as quickly as possible, we here in Boston would be the beneficiary of some additional matching funds that will go to help our director service more folks on affordable housing, open space, historic preservation, et cetera. And also, now that we're into round two, we're going to start thinking about round three, but let folks in your community know. A lot of people just still, believe it or not, don't realize the importance of the CPA and what it can mean for their respective communities. So make sure that they're paying attention, make sure that they're getting their applications in, because they'll be respected, they'll be vetted, and hopefully they'll be recipients of some very much needed funds that will help all of our neighborhoods here across the city, as well as those that are struggling to find affordable housing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Chair moves suspension of the rules and adoption of docket 0317. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Docket 0317 has been adopted.
Docket number 0318, Councilors Campbell and Edwards offer the following order for hearing to discuss the senior home repair program and other housing programs.
Chair recognizes Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And thank you to Councilor Edwards for your partnership on this. This is a hearing, and frankly, creating an opportunity for us to have a conversation not only with the Home Center, but also Department of Neighborhood Development, specifically around the senior home repair programs. Two of my team members, including one of my team members that I call my senior advisor that works frequently with the seniors in our district. We've had a lot of conversation and gone back and forth with the Home Center, those who oversee this program for our seniors, sometimes with success and sometimes not. But in cases where seniors have complained that once they participated in this program, they had contractors come out and do really shoddy work, really bad work. We've had constituents come in with actual pictures of work that was supposed to be done that none of us in this body, frankly, if the contractor came and did the same work in our home, we'd be extremely angered and upset. So this is an opportunity for us to bring forth many of those seniors who have come to us to talk about this program and how it has not worked for them, the lack of accountability for some of these contractors that go out and do the work and don't do a great job. Some of them are still working as a part of the senior home repair program and doing more work on our homes with our seniors. Many seniors have also complained about signing the paperwork and not necessarily understanding the fine print. So we had just recently, I was talking to a group of seniors where the senior actually passed away, and the loan, of course, that they signed passes on to their family members who now have, $30,000 that they have to pay. I don't think any senior would probably sign up for that and pass that burden on to their family. But in this case, they didn't think that this was explained well to the constituent. So there are many ways I think we can improve this program. And it's a great program. It's specifically in certain neighborhoods, including, Mattapan, West Roxbury, Rosendale, Charlestown. We're talking about not gentrification, but displacement. Yes, the city is affordable, but we have a lot of seniors that own their homes. And so we have to make sure that we have programs that help them stay in their homes. Many of these seniors need help with repairing their homes. So this is a great program and something that is necessary to address the housing crisis in the city of Boston with respect to some of these seniors and those folks who have lived in our communities, say 10, 20, 30, or even 40 or 50 years. But we need to make sure that folks who are going out and working with our seniors, that there's some transparent process, that people are being held accountable for the crappy work that they do, and that our seniors are not feeling like they're alone in this battle. And I'll add one story from my district recently where the senior came in with her son, who is a police officer in the city of Boston, and has been advocating for now a couple of years and saying the contractors that came out to do the work in her home did a terrible job. She pulls in her son, who is her advocate, of course. We have meetings with the home center. One of my team members goes out to actually walk through the home, to look at the work firsthand, and to say, how can we do better? After having this incredible conversation here at City Hall, we go out to do this tour, and the people from the home center didn't really show up, so it was just this back and forth. And if it's back and forth with us, I can't imagine how some of our seniors feel that have gone through this program where it has not been a success and feel like they're advocating by themselves and that no one is listening to them or standing up for them. So this is an opportunity for all of us to bring these stories to a hearing to say, how do we strengthen this program? How do we hold folks accountable? And we should not have any contractors working for the city of Boston if we have examples or research or evidence that says that they just don't do great work. There are many folks who would love these contracts, who would love to do this work on behalf of our residents in the city of Boston, who do great work. So we need to have a conversation also about accountability. Look forward to the hearing and look forward to the partnership with Councilor Edwards. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Seola.
Thank you. Councilor Edwards, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to work with you, Councilor Campbell, on this particular issue of the senior home program. But I wanted to make sure that the reason why I also signed on for this is because I've been on that other side. I work for the city with the folks at the Boston Home Center. So I've been in the side of the person who's been called to a city council hearing to testify in front of all of you. And I know what it feels like when you're sitting there 9 to 5 working your best, and as yourself as well, Councilor Siomo and Councilor McCarthy, you both know what it's like to be on the other side, and then to have city council call you in to really talk about the work that you're doing or trying to do, which is not easy all of the time. I want to acknowledge the work of my former colleagues at the Boston Home Center, the Office of Housing Stability, no longer there, but the lead there, Dominique Williams, working extremely hard to deal with the housing crisis that we're in and trying to make sure people stay in home. And so when we do call folks forward, we also want to make sure that when we're holding them accountable, we're accurate when we do that. In many cases, their job is to make sure to build a bridge. Yes, we need to hold them accountable for who they're connecting in terms of the contractors, but also acknowledge the incredible work that is going on that is not stated. I mean, oftentimes only the negative things and negative stories make it to this stage. So I just for them. That's why I'm here also. I feel like I'm advocating in many cases for those who are putting in the 9-to-5 work, working extremely hard for the city of Boston to do right by their neighborhoods and by their neighbors. Other programs, however, I do want to have come forward to talk about how we can enhance and support. For many folks are not aware of the Landlord Guaranty program. That's a program that started to actually provide almost an insurance to small landlords who would house folks who are at high risk, who may have gone through recovery, may have been evicted, may have been homeless, and in many cases, because of that connotation and discrimination, people do not let them in their homes. This is a 2-year program that was insuring up to $10,000 for back rent and any property damage, and wraparound services that came with that. And they found they were matching people who were homeless based on how long they were homeless with folks who were willing to enter into this program. I'd love to hear how that program is going. I'd love to hear how we can expand it. Another program that I have heard some concerns about is the Accessory Dwelling Unit pilot program. As many of you know, the City of Boston was allowing for folks to open up a new unit in the envelope of their home, either the attic or the basement, and allowing them to actually be permitted, taking their 3 to a 4, or 4 to 5, or 2 to a 3. Through a streamlined process. To date, I've heard, and there were 3 neighborhoods where they were allowing this to happen. That was East Boston, Jamaica Plain, and Mattapan. And I wouldn't say that maybe even 100 units have gone through that program successfully. And some people have reached out to me saying, you know, every time I came back with them what I thought was sufficient, it was one more thing, one more hurdle, and another $10,000. Eventually, I just couldn't do it. And I wanted to have that extra basement. I wanted it more than anything in the world. So I just wanted to have this conversation be a balance when we do push on the city as a city council to be innovative. And goodness knows they are responding with the Innovation Lab, with the tiny houses, with all the different kind of prototypes they have in City Hall. When they're coming up with programs, then when we invite them, we want to make sure we're inviting them to know that we do support them, that we want to enhance them, we recognize the good work that they're doing, and then also say now about some of the problems that we're seeing. We hope to make sure that we're working together to resolve them. So that's what I see our partnership, and I look forward to that conversation.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I want to say thank you to the Council President and Council Edwards for their leadership on this issue. I'd like to respectfully ask that my name be added. And I would like to, during the hearing, is consider, you know, what type of fine or what type of penalty there would be to developers that intentionally, or contractors that intentionally, you know, provide shabby work to our elderly, to our disabled, whether it's a fine or a suspension from the program. But I think we need to be transparent that anyone that does commit this type of an offense against the elderly or the disabled, in my opinion, they shouldn't be able to have that type of contract anymore. So I'd really like to see us hit them hard, right in the wallet, when they exploit the elderly and when they exploit the disabled. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. Please add Councilor Flaherty's name, Councilor Sabi George, Councilor Baker, Councilor Garrison, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Wu, Councilor Zakhem, and the chair, please. And docket 0318 will be assigned to the Committee on Housing and Community Development.
Just make sure that's correct. Thank you.
Were you looking to speak on that matter?
I just move for reconsideration on a docket 08.
0308.
I stepped out.
Any objections to, okay. Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. I
Sabi-George.
I stepped out for a moment, and I would like my name be added in support for the re-election of Clerk Feeney.
If we could amend the roll call vote to add Councilor Sabi George in favor of Maureen Feeney.
Thank you. And Madam President, if you don't mind, also, I'd like to add my name for docket number 0309.
What docket was that, Councilor Sabi?
0309.
0309. Oh, I just placed that on file.
Oh, okay.
Yep. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Move to reconsider 0317, Madam President.
0317. Yes. Any objections? No. Go ahead, Councilor Flynn.
I just want to respectfully ask if I could have my name added to that.
Yeah, we might have missed that step. So for
Yeah.
docket 0317, did anyone want to actually add their name? We've already passed it, but formally add their name? Okay. Madam Clerk, if we could add Counselor Baker, Counselor Siomo, Counselor Edwards, Counselor Asabi George, Counselor Flynn, Counselor Garrison, Counselor Janey, Counselor McCarthy, Counselor O'Malley, Counselor Wu, and that's it. Thank you. Okay. Counselor Janey. We clearly missed a lot. Go ahead, Counselor Janey.
While we're adding names, I would request permission to add my name to docket 0318. I was out of the room when you guys...
Any objections? No. Madam Clerk, if we could add Counselor Janey's name to docket 0318.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to personnel orders.
Thank you. Docket number 0319, Counselor Campbell offered the following order.
The chair seeks suspension of the rules and passage of docket 0319. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Docket 0319 has been passed.
Docket number 0320, Counselor Campbell for Counselor Edwards.
Counselor Edwards seeks suspension of the rules and passage of docket 0320. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Docket 0320 has been passed.
Docket number 0321, Counselor Campbell for Counselor Flynn.
Counselor Flynn seeks suspension of the rules and passage of docket 0321. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Docket 0321 has been passed.
Docket number 0322, Counselor Campbell for Counselor Wu.
Counselor Wu seeks suspension of the rules and passage of docket 0322. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Docket 0322 has been passed. I am informed by the clerk that there is one late file matter, which in the absence of objection will be added to today's agenda. Hearing and seeing no objections, the late file matter is added. I believe everyone has a copy. It's a resolution.
First and last.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Offered by City Councilor Asabi George in the City Council, resolution recognizing February 10th, 2019 as Winter Walk Day in the City of Boston. Whereas this year marks the third annual Winter Walk, a campaign raising awareness and funds to help end homelessness in the City of Boston. Whereas this year will bring together again over 1,000 people to share, learn, and support one another. Therefore, be it resolved that the Boston City Council recognizes February 10th, 2019 as Winter Walk Day in the City of Boston, and a reminder that we can and must do more to support our most vulnerable population.
Councilor Asabi George, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to recognize the Winter Walk, a 2-mile walk that helps raise resources for Boston's homeless shelters. I do want to note that 100% of the event proceeds will go directly to partner organizations and critical programs serving our homeless community. I invite you all to join me. It's this Sunday. There are about 1,000 walkers on February 10th, 8:30 a.m. in Copley Square for this third annual walk. As chair of the Committee on Homelessness, Mental Health, and Recovery, it's so important to me that we continue to support those that are making strides towards ending homelessness. I will present this resolution the day of the event, declaring Sunday, February 10th, Winter Walk Day in the City of Boston. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilor Asabi George. Anyone else looking to speak on this matter or add their name? Madam Clerk, if you could add Councilor Baker, Councilor Siomo, Councilor Edwards, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Garrison, Councilor Janey, Councilor McCarthy, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Wu, Councilor Zachem, as well as the chair. You seek, I'm assuming, suspension of the rules and passage. At this time, Councilor Asabi George seeks suspension of the rules and adoption of the late file matter. All those in favor of adoption, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The late file has been adopted. Anyone, at this time, we'll move on to the green sheets. Anyone wishing to remove a matter from the green sheets? Moving right along. I am informed by the clerk that there are 2 late file matters to add to the consent agenda. which in the absence of objection will be added to the consent agenda. Hearing and seeing no objections, the two late file matters are added. At this time, the chair moves for adoption of the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The consent agenda has been adopted. Any announcements? Councilor O'Malley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent to make a brief statement.
Any objections?
Regarding in memorial. Thank you. Some of you know there was absolute tragedy yesterday afternoon in West Roxbury. A woman was crossing the street and safely and was hit by a car, and was killed. She was sent to the hospital last night with life-sustaining injuries and was pronounced dead later last night. Her name hasn't been released, so I just, I want to respect, obviously, her family, and there will be a formal closing memory of later, but I just wanted to ask all of you as we close today to also keep her in our thoughts and prayers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. Anyone else? Well, I'll just add, go Pats. At this time, I ask all guests and my colleagues and staff to please rise as we adjourn today's meeting in memory of the following individuals. For Councilor Siomo, Raymond Maloney. For Councilors Flynn and Flaherty, Martin Dolan, Carol Dapkus, James Fitzpatrick, Thomas Gannon, Rose Linehan, Nora Loftus, Rosemary McDonough, Thomas Walsh, Harry Hayes, and Patrice Geraci. And for Councilor Janey, Teresa Andrews, David Dana Robinson, Marilyn Dawson, Edward Jamerson Harvey, Cheryl Millard Facey. A moment of silence, please. Thank you. The chair moves that when the council adjourns today, it does so in memory of the aforementioned individuals. We're scheduled to meet in this chamber at Boston City Hall again on Wednesday, February 13th at 12 noon. All those in favor of adjournment say aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The council is adjourned.